What is up, my guys, my subs, my subscribers? And today, we're doing this because I'm really motivated by this. You see, I don't know where to start with this because I have a really good plan for this, but I want to name it Betrayed Deku, but I want to do a texting story about this, basically, guys, so yeah. If you like reading this right now, then yeah, so I'll try to start the story off. You know what? I'm gonna do this as Betrayed Deku. Because why not? And if you're wondering, no, this is not any relation to my Direct Creation series. It is not. I'm still continuing that. So please understand, I just want to do this. By the way, Betrayed. Deku thought all his friends would back him up. But they didn't. They just said that he was a traitor. And they didn't even call on Shindo. He was sent to prison for life to attempted murder of his own mother, which he didn't obviously do. He's been there for 3 days, and the prisoners treat him like shit. He's not left alone. The police officers just let the prisoners beat up on this kid since he's quirkless again. All Might already took Deku's quirk away, his quirk back, and named Baku his successor. Little do they know that they've just unleashed something more dangerous and more twisted into the world. Deku's, well, I want to call it his quirk will finally awaken, but it's not a quirk, or kind of. In order for him to activate it, he physically and mentally needs to die. But that's all, I'll get into it. It's another normal day. Prisoners keep calling him quirkless, useless, and a murderer. At this point, he's grown used to it. But he's sick and tired of people thinking that he murdered his own mother, which obviously he didn't do. As he was getting out of his cell, he gets getting beaten up by a police officer that was right next to his cell and calling the other prisoners to come over here to beat him up. They beat him up for several hours until they finally go back to for roll call. Deku gets up and spits out blood from his mouth as he walks down to the canteen area. He looks at everyone there, and they look at him with enjoyment because they beat the living shit out of him. And yeah, the LOV did frame Deku, but yeah, but I'm gonna get to it. As Deku sat outside the prison. Not outside the prison, he's like in the prison, like, recess area. He just sits there and wonders what went wrong with my life? Why did my friends betray me? Didn't they trust me enough? As Deku begins almost trying not to cry, but he cries a little bit. However, he hears a voice in his head that says, "You were like us." As Deku's like, "Who said that?" As the voice began to speak again, "We were creations of our Creator," reveals himself in Deku's mindscape. As Deku's terrified, but he can't move because due to fear. As creation says, "We've watched you for a long time." As Deku's like, What do you mean, we've watched you? As a bunch of other animatronics began coming out of the shadows and surrounding him. Looking like all like this that you see in the picture right here, guys. As creation says, we are your quirk. As Deku's like, what? But I don't have a quirk. As Deku's like, shrugs off the fear and due to mere shock. As creation began explaining about how he and the others were actually watching him and weren't in dormant, just watching him, seeing what he'd do. But since the All Might ruined his dream, that just broke, that awakened them. They were able to speak to Deku then. Because Deku had to have another dream that would be shattered for them to be able to talk to him. The only thing that would give him hope was All Might, but he took that away. And thanks to All Might, they are now able to help Deku. As Deku's like saying, well, if you're my quirk, then why didn't you manifest? As creation says, well, we're not actually a quirk. But there's a price. There was a price to be paid if you ever knew we existed, Izuku. As Deku's like, what's the price? She's kind of scared a bit. She's not, creation whispered to him and just said, you would have to die. And then you'd have to die. And then you would become the quirk itself. As Deku's like, I'd have to die? As Deku's like, saying like, so, what happens to me when I become my quirk? His creation been explaining about how that Deku's a combination of this certain quirk. It's called the joy of creation, and how it's able to make anything out of nothing, out of pure darkness. And he can even, if he wants someone to stay there for like, where it's just obviously minutes, but to them it's hours. Because the darkness, he has his very own void area. But that's why the joy of creations we're not able to reach him. That's because Deku is the only one that could get in and out of the void freely. You see, when Deku was born, the quirk separated into that void, trapping his quirk there. And after that, after All Might broke Deku's dream, that's how they were able to talk to him. But only for a little while, he said. As Deku's like, so you're saying that I had a quirk, but... As Deku's laughing extremely like a madman, as he just says, so, I have to kill myself. As Deku smiles with, like, really of joy, but creation says, well, we'll meet again soon, Izuku. As Deku's like, wait, where are you going? As creation says, this is all the time we have. As Deku's like, wait, I have so many questions. As creation begins fading away from his mind, creation says one thing to him. Always remember the joy of your creations. As he fades away, as Deku gets punched in the face by a prisoner inmate number 445. As the inmate begins saying about how useless he is and how he how useless he is, and he deserves to be in here, and he deserves to be the prisoner's own punching bag. As Deku smiles and just says, "Oh, no, I won't be a punching bag much longer." As the prisoner begins beating the shit out of him, and that's when the guard just says, "Okay, that's enough. You get your fun tomorrow morning." As the guy's like, "You better be ready, kid, because I'm gonna go a lot more tougher this next tomorrow." The guy is smiling off and walks away. As Deck is gonna get his revenge, but he wants to make sure that the prisoner endures it. He's gonna endure the hardship of the pain that Deku went through. So Deku got up and went back to his cell. As the security guard said, "Good job, you idiot. Good job. You made a few enemies today, kid." As the guard smiles and just spits on him as he walks away. And Deku's like, "You idiot. I've already got what I needed from him." And the prisoner had a shank. So Deku began slitting his own throat and began going to bed, and he began slowly dying. As he dies in the next 30 seconds. His soul was ripped out of him, and then the quirk itself finally was back into him and merged with him. But something was happening to him. His body began transforming into his body, but he could feel that he could change it. He could feel that he was invincible. It was as if Deku was meant for this. He was always meant to have his quirk back. As Deku went back onto the ground, and he looked behind him, and he saw his old body. As Deku smiled and just says, "Man, I'm gonna miss my old body." As creation begins whispering to him, "Ah, master." As Deku's like, "Whoa, master." As creation says, "Yes. Since you are our creator, you are our master. We will do anything to fulfill your wishes." As Deku smiles and this says, "Well..." As Deku begins hearing the animatronics' names, he just says, "Ignited Springtrap." As Springtrap begins forming behind the bars in the prisons, in the prison, or in the cell, like behind the cell. As Deku smiles and just says, "Ignited," as Ignited bows to him and just says, "My master." As Deku whispers to him and tells him to take the blame to make sure that you murdered me. As okay, I'm trying to explain this basically. Springtrap's gonna take the blame for kill. He's gonna be taking the blame for killing Deku, but actually Deku committed suicide. So when the police guard gets back, because when he gets back, he's just gonna see this animatronic ripped off Deku's old body, and Deku doesn't even give a fuck about that body anymore, because now he's free to do whatever he wants. Oh yeah, and the void area, he can make anything there. Guns, ammunition, anything that he can imagine. And, and no one does like a tattletale, do they? But anyway, go back to the story. As the security guard was going back to Deku's cell, as Deku's like, Springtrap. hide behind the corner. As Springtrap hide behind the corner, or went to the darkness. As the prisoner's like, hey, Deku, it's time for roll call, because it was the middle of the day. As the security guard's like, Izuku, Midoriya, roll call. As the police officer began opening his cell, and it just says, listen, kid, you were quirkless, so... When the guard rolls over Izuku, he just sees his throat's been slit. And the guard's like, so, this kid killed himself in his... As something grabbed behind the guard's, neck and snapped it. And threw him outside of Izuku's cell, which all the prisoners looked and saw the police officer that let them beat on Izuku completely, his neck completely snapped in front of them, and that body went all the way to the fucking cafeteria. And all of a sudden, the doors begun disappearing in the prison. Which actuality they never did. But since Deku can touch, if he's touching the ground or anything, he can make that his own domain. So Deku just made that prison his domain. And he is not happy, and he is so pissed off that they've beaten him on so much, like Class 1A did. And Uraraka was the first one that left him, because Uraraka was Deku's girlfriend. And Deku never met Melissa, so that's gonna be fun. Oh, so WPWY, oh yeah, the Uraraka's not gonna get a quick death. She will get a death of her getting her nails plucked over and over again until that Deku decided to, I don't know, cuts her skin off and just lets her slowly die as he begins stabbing her and cutting off her oh my gosh, the things that are on the women's chest, and he begins eating one of hers in front of her. If you're wondering, that's so fucked up. It is, because I am going to get so descriptive with it, but I'm going to get back to it. As the prisoner said, what? As the prisoner begins trying to wake up, grabs the guard, and he sees his neck's been completely snapped, and all they hear is as all the guards look, and they look where the police officer was, the security officer was thrown, and they just see this robotic rabbit and a bit of someone's corpse inside of it still. As the security guards begin rushing to the guy, and they think that this guy must have somehow got his quirk collar deactivated, because all the prisoners have quirks there, and they are extremely dangerous. But Springtrap was not alone. Deku grabbed the other two security guards by the heads, and crushed them together. As Deku turned around facing the other prisoners, Springtrap killed the other prisoner, crushing his skull with his hands. As Deku just looks at them and just begins laughing maniacally like this, oh, it's so funny that you think that you get away with beating the hell out of me. As prisoner's kid, we're just joking. As Deku's oh, I've learned a few things, begins walking to the prisoner. And that is, don't lie to someone. As Deku grabs the guy's heart, piercing his hand through him, and crushes it. As the lights begun to flicker, and all of a sudden, the animatronics that you're seeing right here appear. as Deku begins like putting out his hands and like saying, "You've messed with my creations. Now they will tear you apart." And the gore is a lot of gore. The door is already disappearing and stuff, and yeah. Oh yeah. I want to do something like really bad, but I can't. So my mom and my nana are watching because I really want to do it. So. I want to do it, but I'll get my channel like. As the carnage went on for 2 hours until no one was left. No one but the security warden, and she was a female, and she was she was a really young security warden. As with the body began like grabbing her and taking her to the cafeteria, as she just sees the gore and just sees one of the animatronics bite off one of the guys' head and begins eating it in front of her, even though she was like wondering how the hell that these things are able to eat. As Withered Bonnie throws the word in front of Deku, as Deku just standing there, looking at her with that death stare, as she's quivering in fear. As Deku looks at her and just says, "You really shouldn't have messed with me." As the warden's like saying, as she's like, "Please don't. I'm sorry." As Deku's like, "Oh, you think I'm gonna kill you?" As she's like, as she's like, "Yes." As Deku's like, "I'm not gonna kill you." As she sighs for relief. But, Deku says, she's getting terrified now. "I am not. You're going to suffer like how I suffered." As she's like confused. Oh yeah, since the whole prison's Deku's domain, he can create like vessels. He can create like puppets. And the funny part is, the reason why the animatronics began eating the prisoners is because Deku's gonna make that prison just a regular prison to people who drop off prisoners here. But when the people leave the prison, the prisoner begins to slowly die of old age somehow. And that's because Deku is gonna make that place as a place of draining people's lifespans. I did tell you guys, his quirk is called the Joy of Creation, so he can create anything. Even if it's not like the laws of physics, he surpasses the laws of physics, mentally and physically. But, sorry guys, I'm like super tired, and I don't want to continue this, but if you guys like this, tell me in the comment section, because I can't think of a good name for this, because I want this as a texting story as well. If you guys want to see that for a texting story, please tell me. I will 100% be down for doing part 2, but anyway, I'm going to, end the video here, guys. I'm sorry, I wanted to do more, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you on my next video.